The bell finally rang through the monotony, unleashing a cacophony of joyous shrieks and the thunderous slam of walkers. Lucia, basked in the bustling energy, a familiar scene that had colored my days for the past 17 years. Since earning my teaching degree, armed with boundless idealism, I had chosen this path despite my parents' well-meaning advice. They, ever so practical, had hoped I'd pursue something secure, like accounting or law. But the mere thought of being chained to numbers or tangled in legal debates sent shivers down my spine. Miss Looky. A tiny hand tugged at my sleeve. Glancing down, I saw Maggie, a slight girl with eyes as bright and curious as a starlit sky, bouncing eagerly on her toes. "Can I stay after school today? I finished all my homework, and I want to talk about that book you mentioned." A smile naturally found its way to my lips. Maggie was one of those rare gems who consumed knowledge voraciously. Most days, she'd linger after class, her mind bursting with questions about everything from the mysteries of black holes to the nuances of Shakespearean drama. "Of course, kiddo," I replied, playfully ruffling her hair. "But on one condition, we get a healthy snack first. No grand adventures on an empty stomach." She giggled, her laughter as infectious as ever. "Deal." As the school day wrapped up with a chorus of goodbyes, Maggie scampered toward the entrance, looking for her usual ride. Today, however, it wasn't her mother waiting, but a man I hadn't seen before. Tall and broad-shouldered, he greeted her with a warm smile that lit up his eyes. "Hey, Maggie," he boomed, bending down to her level. Maggie squealed with delight and jumped into his arms. "Uncle Liam, this is Ms. Looky, my favorite teacher." Liam extended his hand. "Liam Miller, nice to meet you. Maggie talks about you all the time." His handshake was firm, his gaze lingering just a moment longer than necessary. I felt a blush warm my cheeks as I stuttered a greeting. "So, Ms. Looky," Liam said with a playful twinkle in his eye, "you must be some kind of superhero to keep this little whirlwind focused all day." Maggie giggled, and I couldn't help but smile back. She's a bright one, that's for sure. A joy to teach. Over the following weeks, Liam became a familiar face at afternoon pickups, and our initial awkwardness gradually gave way to relaxed, engaging conversations. He was witty and insightful, and spoke about more than just kid-related matters. One afternoon, while Maggie was lost in a book I had lent her, Liam stayed back after the bell had rung. "Listen, Ms. Looky," he began, a hint of hesitation in his voice. "This might sound a bit sudden, but would you like to grab a coffee sometime? Just the two of us, of course." My heart raced as I replied quicker than I had expected. Sure." That coffee led to dinner, then to drinks, and soon to stolen moments whenever we could manage. We fell for each other quickly, caught up in a whirlwind romance of stolen glances and late-night texts. A year later, Liam slipped a diamond ring onto my finger, his eyes reflecting the joy in mine. We married in a small ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family, sealing our shared journey with a kiss. At first, my parents were wary of my whirlwind romance with Liam, but his effortless charm soon won them over. Life seemed idyllic. I had a loving husband, a supportive mother-in-law, and an energetic niece, Maggie, who spent most weekends with us. Liam's sister, Kayla, however, was a different story altogether. With her fiery red hair and a penchant for tight skirts, Kayla was the embodiment of chaos. Most evenings, Liam would field frantic calls from her, often ending with him rolling his eyes, exasperated by yet another dramatic episode. Kayla, for her part, barely tolerated me. Each visit was peppered with snide remarks about my boring life choices and jealous jibes at our seemingly perfect family dynamic. One night, after Kayla made a particularly cutting comment about my old-fashioned values, I reached my breaking point. As soon as she left, I turned to Liam, frustration seething within me. "Liam," I whispered sharply, "Maggie needs more stability. Can't you see? Your sister wouldn't know responsibility if it bit her." Liam, visibly irritated, retorted, "She's my sister, Lucia." The tension boiled over. "And Maggie's your niece. How long will you pretend everything's fine? That girl deserves a real parent." not just a sporadic entertainer. Liam stormed out, leaving me seething alone in our living room. It wasn't the first time we'd clashed over Kayla, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. A seed of worry had planted itself in my mind, a worry that would soon grow into a full-blown storm. Months after the initial euphoria of our wedding, it was time for a more serious conversation. We sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by the remnants of our takeout dinner. I tried to keep my voice even. "Liam, we need to talk about finances," he sighed, leaning back. "Finances? Lucia, we agreed on a shared account, remember? 50/50ths. It seems like you haven't been contributing much lately," I said, the weight of my words filling the room with tension. Liam frowned. "Yeah, well, Kayla's going through a tough time again. She needed some help with Maggie and all." My frustration resurfaced. "Liam, we can't keep bailing her out every month. We have our bills and groceries." "Look, Kayla's family. I have to help her," he replied defensively. "And what about our family? Isn't Maggie part of our family too? You're spending our money on their expenses," I countered, my voice rising. Liam slammed his fist on the table, startling me. "Don't you get it, Lucia? They need it more than we do. You keep the house clean. That's your contribution. Stop nagging about every dime." The harshness in his voice shocked me. This wasn't the easygoing Liam I had fallen in love with. This was a man burdened with secrets and growing resentment. I swallowed hard, refusing to be intimidated. "That's not fair, Liam. We agreed on a system, and you're breaking it," he scoffed. "Life happens, honey. Deal with it." With that, he stormed out, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of the kitchen. The takeout turned to ash in my mouth. Liam's outburst confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't just about Kayla's current rough patch. It was a recurring pattern. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, a knot of worry tightening in my stomach. The next few months passed in a blur, with Liam ceasing his financial contributions. Every time I tried to discuss our issues, Liam would deflect with a weak excuse or a dismissive comment. The bills began to accumulate, and I found myself dipping into my savings and then relying on my salary to keep our household running. It felt as though I was the sole provider for a family that wasn't truly mine. The most disheartening part was that Liam seemed indifferent. His evenings were consumed by his phone, taking calls from Kayla or mysteriously vanishing for hours. The man I had fallen in love with, who had promised a shared future, was slowly becoming a stranger, his secrets driving a growing wedge between us. As months dragged on, each day mirrored the previous one in monotony. Liam's absences lengthened, and his excuses grew increasingly flimsy. He would disappear for entire evenings, his phone always set to silent. On the rare occasions he was home, his visits were brief, just a quick hello and goodbye, his attention perpetually fixed on his phone. Even family dinners at my in-laws turned into a painful act, with Liam like a ghost at his table, offering only half-hearted greetings before retreating to hushed phone calls outside. One evening, after another dinner marked by strained silence, I reached my breaking point. Liam, barely acknowledging my presence, idly pushed his food around his plate. "Liam," I began, my voice tight with pent-up frustration, "we need to talk." He looked up, irritation flashing across his face. "About what, honey?" "About you. About us. About where you disappear to all the time," I blurted out, my emotions spilling over. Liam sighed dramatically, an over-the-top show of exasperation. "Look, I'm swamped at work. It's a demanding time." "Work?" I scoffed, disbelief seething. "You haven't worked late in months. What's going on, Liam?" He pushed back from the table, his expression hardening. "This isn't up for discussion. You wouldn't understand." "Try me," I challenged, raising my voice. "Because all I understand right now is that there's a stranger living in my house." The ensuing silence was chilling. Liam stared at me, jaw clenched, then abruptly left the room. I sank back, overwhelmed by the crushing weight of his indifference. Days turned into weeks, and Liam's absences became a constant. He ignored my calls and texts, leaving the silence in our once vibrant home to echo his disappearance. One morning, I awoke to find an empty bed and a stark realization. I was alone. Driven by desperation, I poured my emotions into an email, articulating my frustration, loneliness, and the life we had promised each other. I demanded answers for his constant disappearances and a fair share of the financial responsibilities. Clicking send felt like tossing a stone into an abyss, my words vanishing into the vast emptiness of our crumbling marriage. The silence that followed was a harsh confirmation of my fears. No apology, no explanation, just an overwhelming void. But as the sun set, casting angry shades of orange and red across the sky, I discovered a single sheet of paper on the kitchen table. Stark white against the worn wood-lay divorce papers, signed by Liam. My breath hitched, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. I grabbed the papers, the words blurring before my eyes. Rage surged through me, hotter and more intense than I had ever felt. I slammed my phone down, dialing his number with trembling fingers. The call went to voicemail. I left a fiery message, demanding an explanation for the papers and for everything he had put me through. As I reached out again, all I got was the cold, mechanical voice of his answering system. I dialed over and over, a desperate hope clinging to me, yearning for the sound of his voice. But when a voice finally broke through the silence, it wasn't Liam's. Instead, it was a brash, youthful voice, heavy with entitlement. "Who is this?" she drawled. My heart sank as I managed to whisper, "It's Lucia, Liam's wife." Her laugh was chilling. "Wife. Oh, honey, you're old news. Liam's all about the future, and that's me. So, you might want to find a new place to hang your hat, okay?" The phone slipped from my numb fingers, hitting the counter with a soft thud. My world crumbled, the cruel reality settling heavily in my stomach like a stone. Betrayal, sharp and searing, coursed through me. Tears blurred my vision as I fled the apartment. The divorce papers crumpled tightly in my hand. I needed someone strong. My mother-in-law was that person. I drove to her house in a daze. When I reached her doorstep and knocked, she opened the door, her eyes wide at my distressed appearance. Without a word, I fell into her arms, my emotions bursting forth. She held me, her gentle comfort soothing the deep wounds in my soul as I poured out my heart, Liam's deceit and treachery. A spark of anger flickered across her face. "Lucia, you'll stay with us," she declared, her voice steady. I nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. This wasn't the life I had envisioned, but stepping into the house, I felt a small hand tug at my coat. It was Maggie, Liam's niece, her eyes wide with concern. "Auntie Lucia, what's wrong?" she asked softly. I knelt and hugged her. "It's okay, sweetie. Everything will be all right." Holding Maggie close, a new resolve fortified me. This new chapter wasn't just about picking up the pieces. It was about rebuilding a life grounded in genuine trust and love, not just hollow promises. Though the path ahead was daunting, I knew I wouldn't walk it alone. The bitter taste of betrayal lingered, but I was determined not to let it defeat me. My first stop? The office of Remy Miller, a formidable attorney known for her sharp mind and even sharper courtroom demeanor. Her office was a mix of sleek chrome, expensive suits, and the subtle scent of fine cigars. As I entered, my gaze was suspicious. It was clear this wasn't just about late nights at the office. It was something deeper, something he'd tried hard to hide. With a hardened resolve, I faced Remy. "Divorce," I said firmly, the word heavy in the air. "And financial compensation." Interest flickered in Remy's eyes. "Compelling, Lucia, but accusations alone won't suffice. We need solid evidence to expose your husband and his secrets. That evidence would come through Mr. Matthias, a private investigator with a knack for sniffing out trouble." Mr. Matthias, with his weathered face etched like an old map, took a hefty stack of cash from me and got straight to work. Days turned into weeks, with the only sound in my now empty apartment being the relentless ticking of the clock. Then, on a particularly gloomy and rainy evening, Mr. Matthias appeared at my door, clutching a manila folder like a lifeline. "This," he grunted in a voice rough as gravel, might be just what you need. My heart pounded as I hastily flipped through the contents of the folder, transcripts and audio recordings that splintered my heart anew with each word. The voices of Kayla, my so-called sister-in-law, and her conspiring friends filled the room, each sentence a stab of betrayal. "He's loaded," one friend envied aloud. "Practically prints his own money." Kayla's laugh was cold and hollow. "That apartment of his is a gold mine. Once I get Liam to marry me, we'll convince him to sell it. Then there's Maggie's supposed medical treatments. We could make a killing splitting that." A chill swept through me. Kayla, the parasite, had been exploiting Liam, and her friend, his lover, was a willing accomplice in their scheme to strip him of everything. My cozy apartment was not a family home to her. It was a ticket to luxury, and Liam was merely a pawn in their twisted game. With this damning evidence in hand, I returned to Remy's office, fury simmering within me. Remy listened intently, her eyes sharp with a calculating glint as the recordings played. "Bingo, Lucia," she murmured, a sly smile creeping across her face. "This is solid gold. It's time to make these deceivers pay." Yet, amidst my swirling storm of anger, a pang of worry struck me. Liam was naive and duped, yes, but innocent Maggie, his niece, was unwittingly caught in her mother's greedy plot. I couldn't bear to see her hurt by the fallout. Rather than confronting Liam or Kayla directly, I opted for a subtler approach. I called my mother-in-law, Mary, urgency sharpening my tone. "We need to meet. Something big has come up," I told her. By the next evening, the air was tense as we gathered around the dining table. Me, Liam, his visibly upset parents, and lastly, Kayla, who swaggered in reeking of alcohol and defiance. Before I could speak, Kayla exploded. "Can you believe it? Child Protective Services just stormed into my place, accusing me of being unfit. They've taken Maggie to some shelter." Disgust tightened in my throat as she ranted, portraying herself as a victim while scheming against her own family. It was then, with a voice steadier than I felt, that I interrupted her. "Actually, Kayla," I said, leaning forward, my voice calm but firm, "I was the one who called Child Protective Services." The room fell dead silent. Kayla's eyes widened, her drunken haze momentarily clearing. Liam looked at me, confusion written all over his face. "You did what?" Kayla shrieked, her voice edged with fury. "Because, Kayla," I continued, unwavering, "you are a terrible person. You've been using your brother just to enrich yourself." I watched as the reality of her deeds began to dawn on everyone in the room, my resolve firm. This was about protecting Maggie and exposing the truth, no matter how painful. As I confronted Kayla, her willingness to sacrifice her daughter to achieve her selfish goals was laid bare. "Maggie deserves better than this," I declared, just as Kayla, overcome with fury, lunged at me. Her face was twisted in rage, but before she could reach me, Liam, usually slow to react, intervened, grabbing her arms and holding her back. "Get your hands off me!" Kayla screamed, struggling against Liam's hold, her efforts futile. "You're both done for. You'll regret this." Liam, still looking confused, finally asked me, "What's all this about, Lucia?" I pressed play on the recorder, letting the incriminating conversation between Kayla and her friend fill the room. As Liam listened, his face paled, and a mix of shame and disbelief washed over him. He was hearing his sister's true view of him, a mere cash machine to be exploited. Cornered and desperate, Kayla exploded. "This is ridiculous," she shrieked, her voice trembling. "You have no right to meddle in our family matters. This isn't your place." Ignoring her tantrum, I kept my eyes on Liam. This was his moment of truth, the moment he would see his sister for the scheming manipulator she truly was. My mother-in-law, Mary, usually the epitome of composure, joined in. "Kayla, how could you?" Her voice, now cold with disappointment, confronted Kayla's betrayal. "This? Betrayal?" Kayla scoffed, her expression twisted. "Please spare me the drama. This was the plan all along. Cozy up to Liam, Secure the apartment, and then target your retirement funds next, she sneered, her voice filled with malice. Mary and her husband, Henry, were visibly shaken by the revelation, their faces reflecting the sting of betrayal. As for Kayla, she spiraled further, her rant peppered with slurs and curses, a stark contrast to the calculated facade she had maintained before. Turning to Liam, I met his gaze. "Well, Liam," I said, my voice steady, "the evidence of your infidelity and her scheming is undeniable. Now, let's discuss financial compensation." Liam opened his mouth, possibly to ask for forgiveness, but I raised my hand, stopping him. "There's nothing more to discuss," I said firmly. "You had your chance. Now it's time for me to move on." The judge's gavel eventually came down, marking the end of a tumultuous chapter in my life. Divorce granted, financial compensation secured. Justice, albeit bittersweet, was served. Kayla and her deceitful friend faced charges of attempted fraud, their dreams of luxury dissolving as quickly as cheap scent. Maggie, unfortunately, remained the most affected. The ensuing custody battles tore through the family court. In a dramatic twist, it was revealed that Kayla's ex wasn't Maggie's biological father. The truth, stubborn and unyielding, refused to stay buried. With no known father and an unfit mother, the judge awarded custody of Maggie to Mary. Her once quiet home transformed into a vibrant sanctuary. Mary, though initially overwhelmed, found a new purpose in raising Maggie. Together, we all settled into an unlikely new normal, building a life of stability and love for Maggie amidst the ruins of past deceptions. In our new, surprisingly functional routine, one quiet evening unfolded with Maggie, a bundle of blonde curls and boundless energy, climbing into my lap. "Mother isn't coming back, is she?" she asked, her small voice barely above a whisper. A lump formed in my throat as I replied gently, "No, honey, she isn't. But you're stuck with me now." A smile, as bright as a sunflower, spread across her face. "Good," she declared, wrapping her arms around me tightly. "I love you more than glitter and ice cream combined." However, life soon delivered a startling turn. It happened on a typical Friday evening. Mary and Henry, my former in-laws, sat across from me, their expressions a complex tapestry of sadness and determination. "We've changed the will," Henry stated bluntly, his voice rough. "The house, the savings, everything will go to you and Maggie." My jaw dropped in disbelief. "But why?" I managed to ask, completely taken aback. Mary reached out and squeezed my hand, her eyes brimming with a mix of profound emotions. "You opened our eyes, Lucia," she explained softly. "We see Liam for who he really is now, a spineless man, too easily swayed by his sister." "But what about Liam?" I asked hesitantly. He was still their son, after all. Henry's expression hardened. "Blood doesn't mean everything," he replied sternly. "He made his choices, and now he must live with the consequences." Mary added, her voice resolute, "You and Maggie, you're the family we have left. You've stood by us, by Maggie, and that's worth more than any blood tie." Life marched steadily onward from there. The house, once hollow with silence, now resonated with the sound of Maggie's infectious laughter and Mary's wise guidance. We had become an unlikely family, cobbled together from heartbreak and resilience, but somehow, it worked beautifully. We were a patchwork of love and new beginnings, a testament to the unexpected paths life can take us down.